Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a surprise episode of Blackonomically Speaking, although it shouldn't be a surprise because it is the third Friday and it is Blackonomically Speaking Friday. That will not change if I can help it. And as you can see, I feel pretty good. I'm okay. On dialysis every day for a couple of hours for this week and next week. That'll change a little bit after next week, but every day I'm taking this a day at a time. I'm doing all right. Happy to be here. Happy that you all are here with me. Energy level, up and down. There's a lot going on, but I am still here, and I will continue to still be here on Black Power Media for as long as I have the energy to do it. So thank you all so very much for coming in and joining me tonight for Blackonomically Speaking. And of course, we are joined by our resident economics professor, Dr. Linwood Tauheed, Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Dr. Tauheed, thanks for joining us once again.
Good evening, everyone. It's always a pleasure to join you. Good to hear that you're doing better and have a plan to do even better.
Yeah, the plan is a lot. So, but look, this is not something that you can kind of lightly deal with. It's literally a life or death issue. So it's hemodialysis every day for a couple of hours, and then when I start to do hemodialysis at home, then it's hemodialysis 4 days a week for 3 hours. And hopefully by then I'll have all the supplements I need and to help with energy, low energy, because that's kind of a problem right now.
Wow.
But I'm still here, so that is the important thing.
Sure. Good to hear.
And you all are here. I see you all coming in. AG, yes, indeed, I'm back. I haven't really gone anywhere, just taking a little break. Lene Demoy, how are you doing? Good to see you. Kamari Dream Child, Big Teal, Ariana Gladney. Thank you all so much for joining me and Dr. Tauheed tonight as we talk about actually a housing issue, but a housing issue that is not traditional in the sense that we're talking about people who are looking for a mortgage, who are being priced out of the housing market. We're going to talk about another kind of non-traditional housing issue that is now being targeted by the same greedy venture capitalists that have snatched up and captured the traditional housing market. But before we do, for those of you who are on Black Power Media, y'all, thank you so very much for your support. And for those of you who are watching on Luqman Nation, also thank you for your support. I really, really appreciate the love and the support, the prayers, the good thoughts, everything. Keep them coming. I will continue to need them. But look, please support Black Power Media throughout this entire time. You can support Black Power Media through Patreon on patreon.com/Black Power Media. And you can support Luqman Nation on patreon.com/Luqman Nation. Every little bit goes to the content. We don't waste your money. And for patrons of either platform, you get patrons merch and patrons streams. So thank you so much for your support. We appreciate you. Big Teal, I might it because I just might say that later on. But let's get to this issue because my friend on Facebook out in California, Yami Sutra Grace, sent me this article and asked me if I had heard anything about this phenomenon. And I had not. So I'm going to share it with you. And this is from a source called Surviving Tomorrow. I never heard of them. And I'm going to check out some more of their content. But they highlight how private investment firms are now buying up trailer parks and jacking up rents. The author is Jared Brock, and they go into a great deal of detail about how this is done. They go over, the basics about why for-profit landlording is evil because it's a parasitical, non-contributing activity that monopolizes property in order to loan it to someone and receive it back with interest. And I feel like I need to stop right there, Dr. Tauheed, because very often when we talk about landlords, people will say, well, what about me? I'm renting, a room in my house. What about me? I own an apartment building and I am trying to, rent the units to working class and poor families. Am I a blood-sucking leech too? What do you say to people? Because I have actually been in the situation where I do have a home and I have tried to help people and, offered people a room for, a couple $100 a month. I'm not trying to make money off people. I'm trying to help folks, comrades who need a place to stay. Mm-hmm. Have them throw in and cover the cost of, electricity and whatever. So what do you say to people who respond to the idea of property ownership, rental property ownership, all rental property ownership, as a blood-sucking exploitative capitalist venture?
Yeah. I guess it's a delicate question. It requires some nuance in answering. I'm going to go back historically 250 years. Let me see, 250 years or so, back to Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. Now, people will be surprised to know that Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations wrote that landlords, like all other men, like to reap where they do not sow. Mm. That is, there's a class of persons, landlords being an example of that, who want to be paid for doing nothing. They are predatory. Now, of course, that terminology of rent in that time, 1776, meant unearned income. It's come to mean something different now, because what Smith was talking about was just those who owned land, who, because of the demand, land is a fixed resource. There's only so much land available. And as the demand for land for various purposes increases, the price of the land per acre, let's say, goes up, even though the landlord hasn't made any improvements to the land. They've done nothing to the land, wow. Right? And so they're doing nothing, but they're extracting rent out of that process for doing nothing. They like to reap where they do not sow. Now, we have to distinguish, because part of it is what the term rent means today is not what it meant then. It meant rent on land. Mm-hmm. If one has land and you build a house on that land, and you charge someone to live in that house, you have earned that income. You are the builder. You certainly worked. And to charge for that house or for a room in that house, we call it rent, but it really should be in a different category if rent is unearned income, because this is not unearned income. Still, there's a land that's below that, and if you sell that house in most places, the value of the land has gone up. You haven't done anything to improve that, except you may have done some landscaping, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you may have done some other things with the land. So we have to be nuanced in how we think about how uh, earning money occurs, and how those who can live on rent only in political economy, not just classical political economy, but also Marxian political economy and Keynesian political economy. These people are called rentier. They are the rentier class. They live on rent. So, for example, someone who has stock and their income is from stock, let's say they inherit stock,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all they live on. What have they done to deserve that?
Mm.
I think about a particular person who ran for president. I mean, I could probably look at many of them, but this particular person was ran for president in the Republican side, named Stephen Forbes, right? And Stephen
Mm.
Forbes inherited his father's Malcolm Forbes empire.
Yeah, he did.
Now, Malcolm
Mm-hmm.
Forbes worked to put Forbes magazine in place. He did work, and so he earned at least some of that income, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then he passes it on to his son, Stephen Forbes, who didn't do any work to earn it. And Forbes is running around in the presidential primary, pretending to be an expert on how people should make money when he is a rentier.
Mm.
So to the person who has the room or the house that they're renting off, that house is worth something, and you purchased it, right? You purchased
Mhm.
it out of your income from doing something worthwhile, and you purchased it, and you're charging quote rent on that is domicile rent. It's not land rent.
Okay.
Okay. So that earning of so the earning that you get from renting the house is not predatory. The earning that the landlord gets from just owning the land is predatory, and that
Ah.
responds. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
so this article, which is about finance buying up trailer parks, what have they done to improve the life of people in that trailer park? They've just
Oh.
the land and the trailer park trailers happen to be on the land, but they are back to landlords. Even in the Smith sense, they want to be paid for doing nothing except owning stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then we get into finance. For example, in the 2008 crisis, wasn't the first time, but in 2008, it became very apparent. Foreclosures became rampant, and particularly high in Black and in Hispanic communities.
Right.
People were losing their homes. Finance, BlackRock and other real estate holding entities came in and bought those foreclosures and began to rent them out. And the rents that they charged were higher than the mortgages people who were paying before they lost their houses. And people have to live somewhere. And so when they may have gotten themselves together, gotten a little job or maybe another job and so forth, so they can pay their rent on this apartment, they're now paying for the use of that house that they used to own,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And they're paying more, and they're not building any equity. They are building equity for the landlord.
The landlord.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
So I'm sorry, we have a
no,
question
no, no,
here
no. Good, good.
in the we have a question in the chat, and I think it's a good question. John Kemper asked, what if you rent and have 1,000 units? Is that predatory?
if you're a person who has 1,000 units, it depends on the rent that you're charging.
Mm,
Some of that rent would be, I think, justified as a return on your investment. The example that you were giving of your own experiences, Jacqueline, is, you got you're charging people to live there, and you're not looking to be exploitative of
right.
them, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so you're charging a reasonable rent. But if I would suspect, and it would be an individual case, that if you have 1,000 units, you probably have been able to accumulate enough capital, enough money to buy 1,000 units because you've been overcharging for rent.
Right.
There's a discussion that we can have about billionaires. Even Bernie Sanders has said billionaires should not exist. It should not be a case that someone can make a profit off of anything that would accumulate to $1 billion,
Hmm.
right? We see this in current inflation situations where it's beginning to decrease in the oil industry now. Gasoline prices are going down,
Right.
and we can talk about why. I think it has nothing to do with economics. It's everything to do with politics.
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah.
everything to do with the November election coming up,
Mm,
and Joe Biden needing to say, "Hey, I did something. I brought gasoline prices down." I suspect that if he went, no, well, he's not running, but when the Democrats look, if the Democrats win again or the Republicans win again, that those prices are going to go up. You know, and I
mm,
say that because of an experience back in 2000 when, 2001 when Bush the second
mm-hmm.
became president. Average gas prices in the country were like $3.50. That seems like so long ago.
Yeah, I remember that.
But prior to that, they were $2.50. They went up to 3.50, and the Democrats in the Senate and the House, but were wanting to have investigations, have committee meetings to find out why. But the Democrats in the Senate didn't have the majority. Jim Jeffords, senator, I forget where senator was from, but he left the Republican Party, joined the Democratic Party, gave the majority, and the Democrat says we're going to have these hearings, and prices of gasoline began to fall immediately.
Mm,
That can't be
wow.
supply and demand. You can't change that. Doesn't change that.
Right.
What party is in the ascent? And so we understand now, and even recently, President Biden was talking to oil companies and saying, "Look, I think you're making your profit. So at least some of that profit is unearned income,
Mm-hmm.
it's rent in the classical sense. It's what we call windfall profits. That is, you're charging an increase. The increase in the cost of your gasoline is more than the increase in the cost of the gasoline to you. So if gasoline production prices go up 50 cents and the price of gasoline at the pump goes up $1, that's 50 cents more than needed to maintain
Right.
your profit. That
Mm-hmm.
we call that windfall profits. Another term for that is economic rent. And economic rent is predatory, even to economists like Adam Smith, certainly from Smith to Ricardo to Marx, the classical economists, and Marx took full advantage of that analysis. But even mainstream modern economists, Robert Reich and other folks are saying that, look, a big part of this inflation is because corporations are understanding that they can hide behind inflation to raise their prices, and so we have enormous expansion of profits in healthcare, and enormous expansion of profits in the fossil fuels. In a time when inflation is supposed to be bad for business.
Right. Right. Yeah. So thank you for breaking all that down and how the concept of economic rent applies to other things that we are experiencing right now today.
Mhm. Right.
So when we're talking about this issue of the non-traditional housing market, which is,
Mhm.
the trailer park
Mhm.
housing market, this article points out that in the traditional housing market in the first quarter of 2022, parasite landlording investors, we're not talking about, one person who owns one apartment building. No, we're talking about exactly what they call them, parasite landlording investors, devouring a record 28% of US single family home sales in order to rent trap tenants for corporate profits.
Mhm.
So they say that now that the landlords have bid up middle class house prices so high, they're literally running out of stock
Mhm.
to gouge middle class people on. They're running out of people to exploit in the middle class market. So what do? They
Mhm.
are turning to poor people, and this is where the trailer park issue comes in. So they talk about how one company called Harmony Communities is anything but. They highlight how a trailer park was for sale, and the residents tried to organize a co-op,
Mhm.
but the people at Harmony, which is the landlord, which is the venture capital firm, outbid them. Then they raised the rents by 50%, claiming that the increase was, because they believe in charging a fair market rent for trailer parks now. And then just 1 month after buying the park, Harmony Community offered to sell it to the residents for a lot more than what they paid for it. When the residents made an offer,
Mhm.
Harmony then declined it. This is not unusual. And this
Mhm.
article goes on to talk about how institutional investors, these are the kinds of people we're talking about.
Mhm.
Institutional investors devoured 23% of trailer park sales in the past 2 years, nearly double what they consumed in the 2 years before that.
Mhm.
Who's doing this? Blackstone, Carlyle Group, Apollo Global Management, Stockbridge Capital Group, Brookfield Asset Management. One billionaire, Sam Zell, owns a controlling
Mhm.
interest in 170,880 trailer park sites. And last but certainly not least, arch villain, they call him that, Warren Buffett owns the biggest mobile home manufacturer in the US with half of the total market share. Plus, he owns the two biggest mobile home lenders, where 72% of Black borrowers got their first loan at crushing rates. Dr. Tauheed, I, I I don't think it is an underestimation to say that poor people in trailer parks is the
Mhm.
new frontier for venture capitalists landlording leeches.
Well, trailer parks were traditionally considered a place where the very, very poor had to go because they couldn't live as poor, right? They were very, very poor, so they had to
Hmm.
even move out of the poor communities into the trailer park. They were the dregs of society. When the process that became illuminated in the 2008 crisis that I just mentioned, these companies, many of them on this list, buying foreclosures and then renting them back. Now it you've run out of new homes, right? Because who's going to build new homes when no, builders don't build new homes unless they know they can sell new homes,
Right.
right? And if you've run out of if the poor population has run out of its ability to buy a new home, then they went on to the trailer park, right? You can get a double wide trailer.
Hmm.
But capitalism has no constraints. Its only vision is how much money it can get for money that it puts up initially. and this becomes a it's a victim of it's prey ready to be devoured out in the trailer park, and so they will buy these, and people have to have somewhere to live, otherwise they're going to be homeless, right? And I guess the next move is to buy up property on the sidewalk so you can charge the homeless a rent. But capitalism has no bounds, and so this was kind of the next logical place for predators to go. You're going to go follow the poor and extract as much as you can from them. Um, as I was reading this article and thinking about this, there have been a number of studies by very respectable medical schools and psychologists looking at the psychology of people on Wall Street,
Mm.
and and the conclusion is that there is a high degree of sociopathy and psychopathy among people on Wall Street.
Surprise,
It, it,
surprise.
yeah, it's estimated that in the general population there's about 1% sociopathy and psychopathy. Characteristics of people is that they are risk seeking, they have no remorse, and nothing is ever their fault, and they are very much predatory. That's how they get their thrill. Donald Trump certainly fits into that category. Although I would say that you can find that group among lots of politicians in general, but it's estimated that about 10%, and that might be a conservative estimate. I think 10% of persons on Wall Street are sociopaths or psychopaths. I mean, and so they're going to do this because money is the ultimate high in capitalism, and they have no remorse that they're causing people to, not be able to live or have to be homeless because they're charging too much rent. There'll always be someone they can sell this to. And so this is not going to be solved by responding to their moral character that they have none.
Oh, say that again. I mean,
You can't resolve this by responding to their goodwill or good senses, or they have none of that. They're now the move that the trailer park residents attempted to make to buy the property
hmm
was one that was a good move. It failed because the owners of the property also wanted to make as much as they could.
right.
And we have this idea that, well, it's yours. You should be able to sell it and do whatever you want to do with it. But if they have any moral conscience, then they can understand how much this is hurting the general public. Martin Shkreli, you familiar with that name?
Yeah. Yep.
I guess just got out of prison not that long ago. He was the one who
He's out already?
he's out. Yes, he's out. He's the one who increased the price of EpiPens
hmm
by about 2,500%, if I remember.
Right. hmm
Life-saving device for people who can't, have to have it. Ephedrine, or the ingredient in the EpiPen, I think it's ephedrine,
hmm
is public domain. It's nothing new about it. It's been around for a long time, but there's so few manufacturers of that he was able to increase the price of that tremendously. Now he went to prison for something else, for fraud in general, but it shows the
Right.
character, and
hmm
he is certainly one someone who fits the character of a sociopath or a psychopath, he's I think the reason that he had to go to prison was not only that he committed fraud, but he did it with a smile on his face, and
Yeah.
saying you can't do anything about it. He exposed the
Right.
game.
Yeah.
He
He
exposed
was
the
very
game.
brazen with it. He was very, very cocky, and
Uh-huh.
practically he was almost threatening.
Yeah.
The establishment. So I've done this. Now what you gonna do about it?
Yeah,
And
they had to
so
do
they had to
something.
do
Yeah,
something,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. And
But
that makes it seem as if the other predators are really not, that bad compared to
and,
elephants.
right, and they absolutely are that bad, because in this article, one of the people, um, they capture a couple of comments. One from Mobile Home University, which is, I guess, a course that
Mhm.
exists for people who want to buy trailer parks. And a quote from the course says that the fact that tenants can't afford the $5,000 it costs to move a mobile home keeps revenue stable and makes it easy to raise rents
Right.
without losing any occupancy.
Yeah,
The,
yeah,
the,
yeah.
the idea that these people, the rentier class, uh, don't know that they're hurting people.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think we really need to disabuse ourselves of this idea that they
Mhm.
don't know what they're doing.
Right,
They know that the people they are exploiting literally have nowhere else to go.
right.
So
They're
they'll
gonna
just
take
continue to keep raising rents, raising rents, raising rents until, eventually those people will not be able to pay. They'll have to evict them, and then they'll get some more desperate poor people in to
Mhm.
live somewhere that's not on the street at these
Yeah,
exorbitant, jacked up prices.
yeah. And look, I'm thinking about the list that you just read in the article, and Warren Buffett is on that list. I'm going to distinguish Warren Buffett from the others
Really?
because
How?
yeah, because Warren Buffett his business was creating mobile homes. He is so a
Oh,
producer of mobile homes, right? Not just an owner of mobile homes that you can get in some business deal. If Warren Buffett were able to produce, or someone else produce more and more and more mobile homes, the price of mobile homes would go down. That's not
okay.
a bad thing. See, and for me, that distinguishes two types of capitalism:
Hmm.
industrial capitalism versus financial capitalism.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And so when Marx was writing, and I'm not a Marxian, I've said that before, but Marx has had great insight into the capitalism that he was describing. And he was describing the emergence of industrial capitalism, which in his time was had only a few industrialists, and they were
Hmm.
super exploitative, right? But he was describing a time in which finance was just kind of there if someone who was an industrialist needed money, they could go to the bank and borrow money and pay it back and so forth.
Hmm.
What was leading in the process was industrial capitalism. Industrial capitalism not only, of course, made industrialists wealthy, it made workers wealthy. Now, workers had to fight for that. They had to
Hmm.
organize and unionize and so forth to have that countervailing power. But the typical Marxian way of thinking about that is you take money, you create a product, you sell it for more money. Okay.
Hmm.
When you get into financial capitalism, the middle of creating a product is gone. You take money, you make more money. You don't make anything worthwhile. You just manipulate the price of things so that the price of what you get afterwards is greater than the price of what you put in. So, again, Skrelly is a perfect example of that. He
Hmm.
buys a company that's been selling EpiPens for, $5 a shot, and then he jacks the price up to what, $200 or whatever, 250,
Right.
whatever he put it up to. He didn't do anything. The product is exactly the same. It's just money in, a lot more money out. And
Hmm.
that's what these mobile home buyers are doing. They're taking the same property, probably not even going to maintain it as well as it was maintained before, and they're going to charge enormous rents because they can.
Wow.
And they're doing nothing useful in society. So financial capitalism is something that Marx didn't think of
Of
because,
course.
finance wasn't what it is now. Finance leads, and it is, has purchased politicians, and is extremely predatory. Industrial capitalism was predatory in a way, but it did allow people to leave because it needed labor.
Mm-hmm.
Financial capitalism only needs, and again, back to the 2008 crisis, we have these companies that are buying up foreclosures, and they're getting their money from the Federal Reserve Bank.
Right.
The government is giving them the money to buy up foreclosures and that they're going to rent out.
Mm.
And so they've captured government completely.
Wow. So I just noticed a comment in the chat. I didn't realize that this. I thought that that I was streaming on Black Power Media on
Mm.
YouTube. Apparently, I'm not. I don't know what's happened, but
All
I'm
right.
going to upload this video to Black Power Media later. I apologize, y'all. That was an oversight on my part, but glad you found us anyway. So the other thing about Warren Buffett is that the second part of the way he's described in this
Mhm.
article, and that is that he's a mobile home manufacturer, all right,
Right.
um but he also owns two of the biggest mobile home lenders, where
Mhm.
70% of the black borrowers got their first loan for mobile homes at crushing interest rates. So
Yeah.
does he kind of
The crushing interest rate is the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Does
Yeah.
he kind of straddle the fence
Yeah.
of both type of capitalists?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, obviously, Warren Buffett is, he owns places that produce things, but if he's also charging, whatever the market will bear in terms of interest rates, and obviously charging black folks more than others because of lesser credit or other things, I'd say that portion is predatory. So that portion puts him in the list. The first portion is a dozen for me. So like I said, I think I begin by saying that the response needs to be nuanced,
Right, right.
and
But
so
then
yeah,
you also said, which I think is really important, that if you amass enough capital to be able
right,
to straddle both worlds, to be a producer, but also to be a financer,
yeah.
that's a big old issue right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Warren Buffett by that should not exist. Their billionaires shouldn't exist. No one should have been able to put themselves in that position. Companies like BlackRock and Apollo and all, they do no building. They just buy stuff and
Hmm.
increase the rents, increase the prices of things.
Yeah, now people are saying that there's some background music somewhere. I don't know what's going on with my laptop, but
There is some. I can hear it myself.
I do not know what's going on. But I apologize. I hope it's nice background music. I don't, I don't know what's going on. But anyway, um, let's see. This article goes on to talk about another example of just how repulsive the people who are buying up these trailer parks are. One trailer park owner, Lori Lee, who specializes in renting to sex offenders, she said, and she's bragging about this. Last year, I bought a park down the street, got rid of all the families. Where did all those families go?
Hmm.
She doesn't care, and brought in convicted felons. And then I bought the property across the way. Once you're into it and you're making money, it's easy to say one more, one more. And when she was asked how often tenants leave her parks, she answered, when they die. They stay forever.
Yeah.
They have no place to go. I mean, I think again, that really is just, you know, we really need to be clear that these folks are very aware of the fact that they're exploiting vulnerable populations. You know,
Hmm.
this is not at all to say that people who have been imprisoned and are now released should not have a place to live. Of course they should. But one vulnerable population should not be sacrificed to profit off of another vulnerable population. And this is what they do. This woman kicked families out
Yes.
of the park with no regard for where they went, where if they could find another place. And she did it to move in convicted felons, some of whom were probably sex offenders,
Mhm.
but not to be nice, but to exploit them because
Right.
she knew they were even more vulnerable than the families were.
Yes, yes. This is sociopathic behavior. I mean, it's just that simple. And we well, part of the problem is, as I see it, is capitalism. In a society in which there may be sociopaths or so forth who may come about by just brain, bad circumstances in neonatal, in their mother's wombs, accidents and other kinds of things. There's estimated 1% of the population who are sociopaths. Now, that's American population.
Mm.
In other places, it's probably, it may be less. In other places, it may be more.
Hmm.
But I think there's certainly some environmental factors involved there. But you have a society in which money becomes the driving force in the society. Yeah, all the major politicians, even many who are supposed to be progressive, will argue
Hmm.
that, well, this is a capitalist country, right? And so I'm a capitalist, and that's the way it is. But you have a system that rewards predation. That
Right.
means that the sociopaths and the psychopaths have a clear path to rise to being leaders in that society. If you are a person who cares about other people, nice guys finish last in capitalism. You know, and so if you're going to be at the top, if you've risen to the top, I would say that there's a serious level of bad intentions that you had to operate through
Hmm.
in order to extract an extra dollar, right? You can't live a regular decent life that's not exploitative enough. And so if you've been able to mass $1 billion, you've done it because you've taken that $1 billion from someone else. You haven't paid your employees enough. You've not paid their health benefits. Jeff Bezos is a perfect example.
Hmm.
You have Amazon, which before the Affordable Care Act had a majority of had many full-time employees,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
When the Affordable Care Act comes along, anyone who worked over, I think it's 35 hours a week, is considered full-time.
Hmm.
Jeff Bezos then eliminates most of his
Right.
full-time work, right? You can't work that many hours, so you become part-time, just so that Jeff Bezos doesn't have to pay your health care, right? Walmart and the Walmart empire is an example of they build WalMarts in places and then don't pay their employees enough to afford even a decent living, and so
Hmm.
many Walmart employees are also living on food stamps and Medicare and so forth. So society is providing an income that is being diverted into the Walmarts and the Amazons and these other entities. They are accumulating their wealth because they're not giving back to society what society has given to them. Walmart would be, well, and Amazon would be nothing except for the public transportation system, which we paid for.
Right. Right.
They didn't have to pay for it, and they're not paying for health care and we're paying for food stamps for Walmart and Amazon employees.
Wow. I mean, so all of this is happening, and it seems that the Black Power Media YouTube link decided to work. I don't know what's going on. People have come in, so yay. Welcome, y'all. Tacy, Ready Revolutionary One, Arif Hassan, Iyapo Yapa. Glad to see you. Um, so all of this is happening. The venture capitalists are buying up trailer parks now. What does a housing crisis look like when we're talking about now trailer parks? We
Mhm.
talked about earlier the 2008 crash,
Hmm.
And all indications are that we are in for another housing bubble
Right.
burst. What
Well,
does this look like now when you're talking about trailer parks included in
mhm.
that?
Yeah, we're certainly in for another crash, right? There was certainly a housing bubble leading up to 2008, where it was popular to buy houses, to flip them, and so forth and so on. And so, people are in the process of buying a house that is overpriced, but they know that, or at least they believe that they'll be able to sell the house at more after they've fixed up a little bit, right? And so
Hmm.
we have this process of people chasing money that creates a bubble. And then we have the crash. Now, the crash in housing had nothing to do with the bubble in housing.
Oh.
The crash in housing has to do with fraud on Wall Street in terms of mortgage-backed securities.
Hmm. Hmm.
They blame it on prime rate subprime mortgage holders, the poor, right? Saying
Hmm.
that the subprime mortgage holders, the economy went bad, they lost their jobs, they couldn't pay their mortgages, and so the housing market starts to fall, and that this escalates into the 2008 crisis. That wouldn't have been the first time we've had housing bubbles burst. What leads to the crisis, to the crash in 2008, was these derivatives that were false paper, false
Hmm.
that was not. Marx called it fictitious capital. What? Not really capital, right?
Uh-huh. Not
It
real money.
doesn't represent anything real. A mortgage
Hmm.
represents a house. A mortgage-backed security is supposed to represent thousands of houses,
Hmm.
but then you have this other derivative called a collateralized debt obligation, which is an insurance policy on this. And so, in prior to the 2008 crisis, we had $7 trillion in mortgages in this country, and we have $40 trillion of insurance policies on mortgages. And so when the mortgage process starts to decline a bit, that gets amplified into a collapse in the financial industry, right? It got amplified. It had nothing to do
Right.
with it. The housing market would have recovered,
Hmm.
but the finance market, which was derived from the housing market, that couldn't recover. And
Right.
so, and I also have to say this: if the finance industry had collapsed, that's Wall Street. The real economy would have gone on fine.
You mean
But
to tell me that this society wouldn't have crumbled and burned, and people wouldn't have, that there wouldn't have been, mass suicides and
we would have recovered. There wasn't that big a downturn in housing.
wow.
But the Wall Streeters, Goldman Sachs, through with the Secretary of the Treasury at the time, convinced the government that if finance collapsed, everything would have collapsed, and so they got the Federal Reserve to bail them out. And so the government, now being passed on to President Obama, that problem is the mortgage back the assets, the mortgage backed securities that were
Hmm.
called troubled assets. You had TARP, Troubled Asset Recovery Program,
Right.
right? They were trouble. They were basically junk bonds, worth
Mm-hmm.
nothing. The government buys them at face value, as if they were AAA.
Oh wow.
So the government creates money, and finance goes on, and not only does it do well, but it accumulates that money to buy the houses that are in foreclosure, and they're using that money now to buy trailer parks.
Oh my God.
So
That
so,
I
so
just
yeah, so the government has been captured by finance, and they are financing that we are financing this buying up of real estate by these predatory financial institutions. So we don't have a bubble right now, but we are heading for a crash.
So we've got a couple of questions for you in the chat. Comrade Kwame asks, how is it possible to have more assets than currency?
It's not more assets than currency. Actually, the 7 trillion I mentioned, those were the assets.
Hmm.
They represent mortgages on houses. The 40 trillion is the insurance policy on the assets. Now understand how absurd that is. I buy a house,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say my house is worth 200,000. I go buy an insurance policy. I pay a premium. The premium is worth 200,000.
Mm-hmm.
If my house burns down, it's worth 200,000. The estimated rebuilding is 200,000. So the assets and the insurance match.
Right.
I'm the only one who can buy an insurance policy on my house. You can't buy an insurance policy on my
Right.
house because if you buy an insurance policy, you might want to burn my house down so you can get paid.
Exactly.
You know, that's called moral hazard, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with a mortgage-backed security, with on that $200,000, let's say five other people buy insurance policies on my house. They now mortgage-backed security is like an insurance policy, but it's not really insurance because insurance regulations would have stopped that from happening.
Mm.
And but it is an insurance policy so that if something happens to my house, everybody who owns an insurance policy is supposed to be paid, but there's not enough money to pay them. So the question about assets and currency, there's less currency than assets, but there's this inflation of insurance policies that say that have more insurance than assets, but you don't have more currency than assets. You have the same currency, so there's not enough currency to pay off the insurance policy. And that process of allowing that to happen was due to a couple of things that happened in the Clinton administration,
Mm.
where you had Secretary of the Treasury, who was Larry Summers. You
Back
may
in
have heard
Clinton.
that in Clinton. You may have heard his name recently because he's talking about inflation and all that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Larry Summers has a very sordid history that we could go through in many cases. But when he was Secretary of the Treasury, he prior to that he had advised some of these financial institutions on how to set up mortgage-backed securities. And so, as Secretary of the Treasury, there was a movement to regulate mortgage-backed securities,
Mm-hmm.
which would have stopped the leveraging of insurance policies against actual assets.
Mm-hmm. But
And he and Larry Rubin prevented that from happening. So they prevented regulation, and then 10 years later we have a collapse.
and who does Obama choose to manage the TARP asset fund? But Larry
Yeah,
Summers.
yeah,
Okay, that's a whole nother show.
yeah. It is.
There's another question. Big Teal asks, "What is a recovered housing market?" Ooh, that's a good question.
Well, I suspect that term is used to indicate what occurs after you have the crash,
Mm-hmm.
and now things are settling off again, and you start to see people buying houses again, and housing prices are going up. Because of course, what happened in the crash, 2008 was you have a house that on the books is worth 300,000,
Mm-hmm.
but on the market is only worth 200,000 because people aren't buying anymore. So you're underwater. Your house is worth less than your house is worth less than you owe more on your house than its value.
Right.
Well,
That.
that's an upside down situation. When that
Mm-hmm.
situation turns over and the housing value goes back up more than what you owe on it, then you're recovered in that sense, right? And so
Wow.
you're no longer underwater. And then you'll start to see housing values begin to go up again. That's happened slowly since 2008. So I say we're not in a bubble. Housing values shot up right before 2008,
Mm-hmm.
declined and began to recover, but we're not in a bubble situation now. We will be. All the indications are we will be shortly in a not in a bubble, in a crisis situation. Housing starts are going down. They've declined about 10% this year. People are not buying. Housing prices are up, but also people who are working are not making the incomes that they need to make in order to buy housing and so forth. That's also driving the trailer park exploitation.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wanted to shout out Yapo Yapa, who said, by the way, thank you for a discussion that does not involve a celebrity, rapper, or beef, and talking about something that actually affects my life directly. Thank you. Thank you, Yapo. I
Thank you.
have to be honest and tell you, I really don't pay too much attention to celebrity, too much of anything. I have things that I enjoy watching on television, and most of them are on streaming services, and I stick to that. I don't follow, and I've never been that kind of a person. I mean, I watched C-SPAN in high school for fun. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're not going to get too much celebrity commentation from me. I just that's
You,
another
you, you,
world of
you, you,
people that I honestly don't care too much about.
you're not going to do a program on the Jay-Z Kanye the dispute,
I mean, I've done a program on why Jay-Z is a capitalist that we need to eat just like the rest of the rich. But
Okay.
but other than that, not
Yeah.
not really. I mean,
Yeah.
I will talk about zombie movies for hours. but but other than that, no. I mean, this is and I'm
Yeah.
glad I'm actually glad Iyapo said that, because I was talking to um one of my comrades at work today, because I'm back in the studio, kind of not really part time, but I'm in the studio for 2 weeks. Sean Blackman, the host of By Any Means Necessary, is on
Mhm.
vacation. That brother deserves vacation, because this past year has been one hellscape of a ride for me.
Yeah.
And this, my health issues are just, the icing on the cake, icing on the top of a, you know, cake of poop for me this past year. Um, so I'm in the studio for 2 weeks while he's on vacation. I'll be in the studio maybe 2 days a week for 2 weeks after that, because I'll be on in dialysis training. I'll be training
Mm.
to learn how to do home hemodialysis. That's a 6 to 8 week process. But there are some scheduling issues with the nurses, because they need to go on vacation too,
Mm.
because we don't want to overwork workers, no matter how much we might feel like we are inconvenienced. So I'll be in the studio a couple of days for a couple of weeks. I don't know how that's going to work out. I have to be sure not to scratch this thing, because it itches like crazy. But someone was asking me. Someone asked me, why I pay attention to these little issues, like
Mm.
what we're talking about today, because
Mhm.
talking about them. I was talking about this article to them, and I said these issues have never been little to me,
Mhm.
because even when I was like neoliberalish in my thinking, and there was a time when I was in high school, and I thought the Democrats were great, and
Mhm.
Bill Clinton was our hero, and yeah, that's yes, I believed all that stuff. But then somebody told me something about imperialism, and somebody made the connection, and walked me through the connection, with what the U.S. does around the world, and what the U.S. does to us, people who look
Mhm.
like us, people
Mhm.
who live in our communities. And I was able to connect an issue like the crack epidemic to foreign policy, and it wasn't
Mhm.
even hard.
Mhm.
Once somebody opened the door a little bit of a crack and said, "Hey, did you know the CIA was involved in blah blah blah?"
Mhm.
It wasn't hard to make that connection. So it's like, the thing that people tell you, how you get caught up in conspiracy theories, right? It's like you go down a rabbit hole and you can't stop. Well, here's the thing: just because something is a conspiracy, it doesn't mean it's true. It's untrue. A conspiracy just means that this group of people is keeping something secret from you, or at least they're trying to.
Mhm.
And this entire government is based on a whole bunch of conspiracies. But if we really want to know what they're doing, we can find out. It's because they don't actually hide it very well. So these issues are not little issues to me because I understand that they do affect us. These policies that create these scenarios that perpetuate poverty, that create housing crises, that jack up the cost of housing, that push working people to live in their cars or to live in the street, to
Mm.
push poor people onto the street. These policies are intentional. They're not like the unexpected um uh
Consequence.
afterthought, or the unintentional accidental issue of something else politicians were trying to do, and they didn't realize, oh, this,
Mhm.
we didn't know this was going to affect people this way, and oh, let's go fix it. No, no, no. They, once you go down this rabbit hole of understanding the truth of what this government is and what it has done domestically and internationally and how it's all connected, none of these things are little things.
Mhm.
All of these issues are important to our very survival. So I guess this leads me, Dr. Tauheed, to ask this question.
Mhm.
What do we do
Mhm.
in the face of a government that, as you have said twice now, I think, on the show, that is completely captured by capital?
Yeah, yeah. We had part of this discussion last time about voting, right? About and we, at least in our discussion, we were talking about the November election and the need to vote, right? To use that tool. And the question was asked, well, why are we voting? It never changes anything. And we also mentioned that voting is a mobilization. It's getting you to do something. But we have to organize so that we can determine what our agenda is, so that when we're in the process of mobilizing, we can vote for people who will do what we need to do. And that starts at the local level. You're not going to organize and overturn the Congress, right? It's not going to happen that way.
What?
You're
You
going,
mean
you're
we're
going
not going to vote for some progressives and they're not going to go in there and turn the tables over and change stuff?
well, unfortunately, those progressives, if they've gotten to a point where they can raise the money, many of them that they need to get elected, they many cases already been compromised. People like AOC and Sister St. Louis, and blanking on it, but
Oh, Cori Bush?
the Cory Bush. Those are surprises, right? They surprise the system,
Mm.
right? Because people in their jurisdictions have become so fed up with the status quo that they're desperately searching for someone else. So Cory Bush's defeat over the Congressman
Right, right,
Clay Jr., right, was because Clay has been there and has done nothing,
right.
right? But he was able to continue on because of incumbency. You can't count on that happening everywhere.
Hmm.
You have to organize, and organizing, you don't organize for the next. I mean, you can, if you had a candidate in your out of your organizing that you could believe could beat the Democratic or Republican incumbent who has been there and is doing nothing, then you should put that person up. But politics is in this sense is a practice, and you have to learn how it works, and you have to. I think you start that from bottom up, you know, school board and
Hmm.
up and up. I mean, school board has become important.
See, yes, I have actually been saying this for years. When when I first saw the Tea Party movement emerge after Barack Obama's nomination, this was even before the man even had any national policies, and
Mm,
I'm like, these white people have lost their mind. but I know what they're about to do because, see, I belong to a church where a lot of those folks were members of the church. And I
Hmm.
heard all of the anti Black, the racist stuff. He's a secret Muslim sent by the Muslims to destroy America. And I thought, I mean, dang, he must be awful powerful. Y'all think he must be the most powerful Negro on the planet for you to think that he is going to destroy the United States all by himself. So I saw the way they organized in the churches with these little small meeting of crazy people who really believed that Barack Obama was the Antichrist. Now, of course, his imperialist policies and his disdain for poor Black people, that's that played out exactly the way it is, and he is who he is. But
Right.
when he was the nominee, I saw the way those folks began to organize. And I began saying, then, listen, these people are organizing, they are meeting, they are making plans to take over community, state, and local governments.
Yeah.
If they don't win the White House after Obama's first term, they're fine with that because they
Mhm.
will have organized their way into enough grassroots operatives in key positions in these local governments that they could just move them right into the governor's house.
Right.
And from those governors, they could do a whole lot of different things. And look what happened. And people are just like, oh my God, how are school boards voting for taking slavery out of textbooks? You should have been paying attention to these people
Yeah. Yeah.
and stop and not and the mistake we made on the left, Dr. Tauheed, is that we wrote those folks off, the Tea Party folks. We wrote those off as crazy white people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we did. And this is, I think, what we do very often with white supremacists in general until they kill a bunch of people.
Hmm.
We write them off as crazy, unhinged, racist white people. We just need to ignore them, they'll go away. But they have taken the organizing playbook from the left
Hmm.
and they
Exactly.
used it and they've used it against us. So
Yeah.
I just had to point out that I've been telling y'all, school board, I don't care what the local office is, school board, dog catcher, crossing guard, sheriff, judge, if someone at the local level is elected, then there needs to be people from within our communities who are cultivated to run in those elections
Yeah.
because that's what they're doing.
Yeah. And I say it also that we need to cultivate those new elected officials. We also need to protect them from corruption because the
Right.
system will corrupt them if we let them get too far away from us. We have to keep them safe. And part of the historical movement that has occurred for Black folks is that for certainly since emancipation, right? The federal government has been our friend, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
We federal government emancipated us, and
Mm.
then for 100 years did almost nothing. But when they woke up in the '60s and wanted to protect us in the South, it was the federal government against states' rights and so forth and so on. That made it easy for someone like Bill Clinton to come along and as a quote savior at the federal level, right? Another first Black president at the federal level, and to for the Democratic Party to completely ignore what was going on at the state level and below. We
Mhm.
ignored it. All of the power and all the resources flowed up to the federal level. And since the other side, now Republicans, didn't have that much or the kind of control they wanted at the federal level, they focused on what they could get control of.
Mhm.
And they're controlling these state legislatures. And they are almost controlling enough state legislatures to call a constitutional convention. If 2/3 of state legislatures were to vote to have a constitutional convention that the Constitution as written, as poorly as it is in terms of its implementation, that would just go out the window.
Hmm.
And they would write a new they write slavery back into the Constitution, and we'd have to figure out if we want to stay or go.
Right.
But we took our eyes off the local situation because we're focused on the national, because it had always been the source of our salvation, quote salvation.
Mm,
But they, Tip O'Neill said all politics is local.
that's right.
He was absolutely right. And you don't get to have someone who's going to run for senator, U.S. senator, or president, and so forth, without having someone who's already understanding the politics at the state. I mean, even Obama was a state senator before
People forget that.
he was a state senator before he was a U.S. senator.
Hmm. People forget that. So we got a couple of questions here, and we're gonna wrap up for tonight. A proletarian pizza says, "Wasn't the Tea Party literally reared?" And then he said, "Created by the Koch brothers." No, no.
Okay.
The, the Tea Party has been around for a long time, much longer than when Obama showed up and was nominated for made the Democratic nominee. The Tea Party was always like an anti-government, anti-taxation sort of fringe movement. They've been around for decades. They gained traction by attacking Barack Obama because no black man should be president of the United States. So they gained traction because they were opposed to the black guy possibly living in the White House and telling the white people what to do. And is it true that there was a Koch funding to some Tea Party groups? Yes, that is true. But again, I cannot stress this enough. I don't know why people don't want to just believe this is true. The Tea Party didn't get this infusion of cash. They didn't just pop up on the scene one day on the National Mall in their tricorn hats with tea bags hanging off of them. And Ed Koch looked at them and said, "Hey, let's give those crazy people billions of dollars to advance our agenda." That's not what happened. Those folks organized locally, exactly how we're saying we need to organize locally, exactly how the left used to organize. The labor movement, the civil rights movement, they took the organizing strategies from us
Mm-hmm.
and built what's in Congress right now. And it took them, Obama was in office for 2 terms. Then you had Trump. It took them a decade to really build the kind of political power from the ground up that we're talking about. It took them a decade. And
Yeah.
they were willing to take that decade to eventually get to the White House. And they're going to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we continue to believe that right wing organizing is all funded by a few groups of white right wing, funders, capitalists, and there is no organizing, grassroots organizing being done by the right, we are making a tragic mistake. They are outnumbered by us, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think they out organize us, Dr.
Yeah.
Tauheed.
Yeah, and I think there's also a lesson in that, in terms of the process of organizing, to make sure that your organizing efforts don't become captured by the elite,
Right.
right?
Hmm. Right.
And so it does, for the Koch brothers, what the Tea Party wanted was somewhat aligned with their agendas. Now, not aligned with their, because what the Koch brothers want to do is make as much money as they can, and that's their agenda. And so to put in a free market neoliberal system which allows them to do whatever they want to do was not what the grassroots organizers for the Tea Party were about.
Right.
but you get the narrative, you get the catalyst of a Barack Obama, and now the Kochs can exploit that situation to eventually to still get what they want, to have laws
Mhm.
passed that allow them to get subsidies from U.S. government for fossil fuel, even while we have climate crisis. So the left, in terms of its organizing, has also to recognize the problem that people like George Soros, for example, who
Mhm.
are darling amidst some on the left, has
Right.
his own agenda, and
Hmm.
it's not a left agenda.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Last question from Commie Hill Figure. I love that name. What would you say if someone said the Republican Party could be transformed easier than the Democratic Party?
Mm,
What would
mm,
I say? You want to know what I would say? I
mm,
would say screw both of them. I would say I am not interested in reforming or transforming either of those parties because I don't believe that is actually true. I don't believe that any party that is beholden to this capitalist imperialist system can actually be transformed. I think that we have seen enough politicians who at least give lip service to the idea, particularly, in the Democratic Party. We've seen how easy it is to transform the Republican Party into the MAGA monster that it is. I don't see any utility in trying to not make them MAGA monsters. I think those people are very resolute in what they want. They're clear eyed in what they want. They want a white America with a white president, and they want the blacks and the browns to shut the hell up, at least be quiet so they can have their white America in peace. They want closed borders. We're clear on what they want, and I think we need to be clear that they are clear on what
mm,
they want. The establishment Republicans are sort of unhappy about the transformation of the Republican Party into the Trump Republican Party, but they're fine to go along for the ride to maintain power. They're completely fine with that. So why would I want to transform that party that is that comfortable with that level of just outright blatant depravity? No, screw them. But we've seen how people at least give lip service to the idea that, well, we're going to run as a Democrat to transform the Democratic Party, and we see what happens. The Democratic Party, the machine, the capitalist backed machine of the Democratic Party, eats those agents of
mm,
change, those potentially transformational politicians, i.e., progressives, eats them alive,
mm,
literally starves them of funding for their reelection campaigns. We see the Democratic Party now in the midterms actually contributing to the campaigns of Republicans who have denied the election in the ridiculous idea that they are elevating the worst possible Republican candidates to make it easier for them to win midterm elections. How'd that work out last time? That's how we got Trump.
mm,
Okay, why would we want to transform a political party that not only does not have a platform that provides for improving the material conditions of oppressed people in this country, but also actively spends a whole lot of money making sure that the worst candidates of the other party get elected just because it might make them look good. I think I would say that we need to abandon both parties, this two-party system, and truly work on building political power that is people centered and focused, working class people centered and focused from the grassroots. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, the only thing I have to ask is that the organizing to transform or replace these parties is exactly the same work.
Mm,
It's not going to be any different. You have to get out, you have to educate, and communicate with community to get them to understand that the things that they have power to not just in voting power, there's also economic power. They have the power where they spend their money. And maybe the choices now is not between a black phone company versus the myriad white phone companies. Maybe that's not the choice. But we do have some power to say this company versus that company based on who you support with your campaign contributions.
Hmm.
We have that power, and so that's part of an organizing process that to me is going to be no different if we're going to organize to transform or organize to take or to replace. It's the same process. We have to do the same work. We have to build the same candidates. We have to have the same knowledge base built. Once we have that built, we can decide on whether or not we run as a Democrat or some other. We can decide, but we can't decide that. To decide that before we organize means we're going to be defeated either way.
Dr. Tauheed, thank you so much for another fantastic episode of Blackonomically Speaking.
Thank you. It's always been a pleasure, and we've talked about economics a little bit. We talked about a lot of other things, but
I know.
I always tell my students everything's connected to everything else. So there's no just simply economic discussion that we can have. So when you were saying that people are wondering about you being in all of these little things, well,
Yeah,
little things are all connected to other little things, and then you look at the whole system, you got a big thing.
absolutely. And thank you all so much for joining me. Dr. Tauheed, I'm going to stay on for a few minutes and talk to the folks. So if you want
Absolutely.
to hop off, that's cool. Thanks so much. We'll talk
Thank you.
soon.
Yep. Yep.
All right, folks. As always, I really appreciate you hanging out with me this Friday night. I can't tell you that these are going to be all the time regular because I don't know what my schedule is going to be like. But I do want to give folks who hopped on a little bit later an update. So I am okay. I'm very tired. Dialysis is going reasonably well. It's a lot to get used to. I am right now doing dialysis every day, 2 hours of dialysis every day during the week, and I get weekends off. Oh, thank God. So as you can see, I've got I this thing is backwards. So as you can see, I've got this bandage here. This is the temporary catheter that they inserted so that I can do hemodialysis. This catheter is it draws blood from my jugular vein, and I had to move my hair back because it itches and I cannot scratch this part because it's still healing. Um, it is it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. It's I'm not even going to sit here and tell you that it's not overwhelming. It is very overwhelming, but I am taking this whole thing one day at a time. That is the best I can do. If I get through each day and I have not lost my mind, I figure I'm going to be all right the next day. So that's been working really well. Um, I have been approved, as I told you, I have been approved for the kidney transplant list. They also just approved my little transplant solicitation, kidney living kidney donor solicitation website. So I have to go and personalize the website, and I'll publish that for you all. If anybody who is thinking about being a living kidney donor, there are benefits. Travel is covered. Health insurance is covered. Lost wages are covered. All kinds of good stuff. Yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to really once again thank you all particularly, especially you all in Black Power Media, so very much for your support, for your love. See, this is how y'all do. Thank you, V. Thank you so much. I am gonna get some potatoes. I was really excited because my nephrologist told me that this weekend I can have potassium heavy foods because my potassium levels were too low, and I had been for about a year and a half. I guess since I was diagnosed a little, probably in April with CKD, I completely changed my diet. I did the research. I eliminated all the things that are bad for the kidneys. I haven't had oranges in like a little over a year. I love oranges. Hadn't had bananas, left out no potatoes, limited the tomatoes, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's actually, now that I'm on dialysis, the dialysis actually draws uh, minerals from you. So now I have to put those minerals back. So I can have potatoes this week. And my potato casserole is in the oven right now. I'm so excited this weekend. I can have potatoes, bananas, some oranges so that my potassium levels will be within normal range and I won't be so tired. Which they say is the problem, which is what's causing the tiredness. But I just wanted to let you all know that I really appreciate all the love and support. I am doing okay. It is a lot to deal with. It's a lot to juggle. My whole life is changing again. Um, this past year has been, I can't even describe what this past year has been. Since June 15th, when my sweetheart died, this whole year, June 15th of 2021, this whole year has been absolute chaos, and it's been hell, and it's been really hard to um, stay focused. And honestly, sometimes I felt like to stay sane, but um, I'm still here. I'm still alive, and I am going to do everything in my power to make sure that I stay right here. So, thank y'all so much for joining me tonight. Sorry about the connection issues with Black Power Media earlier. Hope you can catch the beginning of the show on the replay. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all so much. As always, a luta continua. The struggle continues, but I promise, Victoria Acerta, victory is certain. Peace, y'all.